He drew their portraits before he slit their throats. Tonight, you'll meet the only serial killer in San Francisco history whose face is known, whose name sits in a police file, and who still walks free. And the reason no one will testify against him will chill you. San Francisco, January 27th, 1974. Ocean Beach. A thick coastal fog rolls off the Pacific and clings to the sand like wet gauze. The first jogger of the morning notices a shape near the surf line. At first he thinks it's a pile of dark clothing tossed up by the tide. It isn't. It's the body of a man, fully dressed, his throat cut so deeply that the sand beneath his head has turned black. His name is Gerald Earl Kavanaugh, age 49, a mattress factory worker who lived alone in the Mission District. He has no defensive wounds, no sign of robbery. His wallet is still in his pocket. He has simply been led to the edge of the ocean and executed. And in the months and years that follow, San Francisco police will come to understand that Gerald Kavanaugh was only the beginning. He was victim number one of a killer the press would eventually call the Doodler. A killer who is, even now, more than 50 years later, still officially at large. A killer whose face investigators have actually seen, whose sketch sits in an evidence locker, whose identity, according to multiple retired homicide inspectors, is known. And yet no jury has ever heard his name. To understand why, you have to understand the city he hunted in, the men he chose, and the silence he counted on. In the early 1970s, San Francisco was the beating heart of gay liberation in America. The Castro district had transformed from a working-class Irish neighborhood into the most visible gay community in the world. Bars like the Stud, the Pendulum, and Toad Hall pulsed with disco and possibility. For thousands of men who had fled small towns where they had been beaten, disowned, or hospitalized for who they loved, San Francisco was sanctuary. But sanctuary is a fragile word. Homosexual acts had only been decriminalized in California in 1976, and even after that, being openly gay could cost a man his job, his apartment, his family, and his life. The San Francisco Police Department, just a decade earlier, had been raiding gay bars and publishing the names of those arrested in the newspapers. Trust between the gay community and law enforcement was thin to non-existent. And into that gap, into that silence between the dance floor and the morning newspaper, a predator stepped. He didn't kick in doors. He didn't hide in alleys. He sat down next to men at piano bars and after hours diners, and he pulled out a sketch pad. The second body appeared on June 25, 1974, 5 months after Kavanaugh. Joseph Stevens, 27 years old, a female impersonator who performed at the Cabaret on Broadway. He was found at Ocean Beach, the same stretch of sand, same wounds, multiple stab marks to the chest, neck, and back. Stevens had last been seen leaving a bar in the early hours of the morning, alive, talking to a slim, well-dressed young black man. Witnesses said the man had been drawing him, sketching him on a small pad. Then came Klaus Christmann on July 7, 1974. A German national, married with 2 children, visiting the city on business. His throat was cut 3 times so violently that he was nearly decapitated. He was found at Ocean Beach. By now, homicide inspectors Dave Toschi, who was already famous for hunting the Zodiac, and his partners Earl Sanders and Rotea Guilford, began connecting the geography, the wound patterns, and a strange detail that kept surfacing in interviews. Witnesses in piano bars and late-night restaurants kept describing the same young man. Slender, around 6 feet tall, black, polite, well-spoken, carrying a sketchbook. He would approach lonely middle-aged men, offer to draw them, flatter them, and leave with them. He had a gift for it. A real gift. Investigators began calling him the Doodler. The killings did not stop. On May 12, 1975, the body of Frederick Capon, a 32-year-old nurse and decorated Vietnam veteran who had pulled wounded soldiers out of firefights, was found dragged from the surf at Ocean Beach. He had bled out from stab wounds in the dunes. Then the killer had pulled his body toward the water, as if trying to let the tide take him. On June 4, 1975, Harold Goldberg, a 66-year-old Swedish sailor, was found near the Lincoln Park golf course, his body so badly decomposed that investigators believed he had been killed 2 weeks earlier. He would later be counted as the 5th confirmed victim, though some researchers believe the true number is far higher. Estimates range from 5 to as many as 16. Because here is the terrible truth about hunting gay men in 1975. Many victims were never reported missing. Some lived double lives, with wives and children in other cities. Some had been disowned by their families and had no one to file a report. Some were tourists, picked up at a bar and never seen again, with no local ties to flag the absence. The Doodler understood this. He chose it. And then, in the summer of 1975, something extraordinary happened. He left survivors. Not one, but three. The first was a well-known entertainer, a man whose name has never been publicly released, but who is widely reported in investigative journalism to have been a famous Hollywood actor of the era. He was attacked in his own home after bringing the sketch artist back from a bar. He fought back, survived knife wounds, and the attacker fled. The second was a European diplomat, also stabbed, also surviving. The third was another man whose identity has been protected for decades. All three gave police descriptions. All three sat with sketch artists. All three identified the same man. And here is where the case fractures, where it becomes not just a murder mystery, but a tragedy of its time. All three survivors refused to testify in open court. To testify would mean admitting on the public record in 1975 that they had picked up a stranger in a gay bar and brought him home. For the actor, it would have ended his career. For the diplomat, his career and possibly his marriage. For the third man, his standing in his community. Inspector Dave Toshke reportedly told a reporter off the record that he understood. He didn't blame them. But without their testimony, the case could not move forward. The police had a suspect. They had interviewed him. They believed he was the killer. And they had to let him walk out the door. Who was the suspect? Over the decades, fragments have emerged. He was a young black man in his early 20s at the time of the killings. He had a history of mental health issues and had been treated at a psychiatric facility. He reportedly told a therapist that he was struggling with his own sexuality, that he hated the men he was attracted to, that he had violent thoughts about them. The therapist, under California's then murky reporting laws, contacted police. Investigators interviewed him in 1976. According to retired Inspector Earl Sanders, who spoke about the case before his death, the suspect did not confess outright, but his demeanor, his knowledge of details, and his sketches convinced the team they had their man. They could not charge him. The survivors would not come forward. The physical evidence at the beach scenes had been degraded by sand, salt, and surf. And so the file went into a drawer. And the man, whoever he was, walked back into the city. For decades, the Doodler case sat in cold case purgatory, overshadowed by Zodiac, by the Zebra murders, by the Moscone milk assassinations. Then in 2018, the San Francisco Police Department did something unusual. They announced a $100,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. In 2019, they released an updated forensic sketch, aging the original 1975 composite to show what the suspect might look like in his late 60s. In 2022, the reward was doubled to $200,000. Chief William Scott told reporters that detectives had recently developed new information. Investigative journalist Kevin Fagan of the San Francisco Chronicle, who has covered the case for years, has reported that homicide inspector Dan Cunningham, who took over the investigation, believed he had identified the suspect and was in active pursuit. Cunningham has stated publicly that the man is still alive, still in the Bay Area, still walking among us. He has not been named because he has never been charged, but the police know who he is. They have always known. What made the Doodler different from other serial killers of his era was the intimacy of his approach. He didn't ambush, he didn't break in. He sat down, made eye contact, and offered a gift, a portrait. To a man who, in 1975, had likely spent his entire adult life being told he was sick, sinful, criminal, invisible, the attention of a charming young artist who wanted to capture his face was overwhelming. It was, in the cruelest possible way, an act of recognition. And then hours later, on a fog-covered beach or in the privacy of a hotel room, that recognition turned into a blade. Forensic profilers who have reviewed the case believe the killer was working out his own self-hatred on men he saw as mirrors of himself. The sketches were not just lures, they were trophies. They were the killer's way of saying, "I see what you are, and I am going to destroy it." There are reports, never confirmed, that some of the sketches were left at the scenes, folded into pockets, tucked under bodies. If so, they have never been publicly released. In recent years, advocates within the LGBTQ community have pushed hard for the case to be solved, framing it not just as a cold case, but as a civil rights failure. If the Doodler had been killing wealthy women in Pacific Heights, would the survivors have been protected? Would the case have been pursued with the resources given to Zodiac? Would the suspect have been arrested in 1976? These are questions San Francisco is finally beginning to ask itself out loud. In 2022, the SFPD acknowledged publicly, for the first time, that homophobia within the department in the 1970s likely contributed to the case going unsolved. It was an admission half a century late. The families of the victims, many of whom did not even know their loved ones had been gay until they got the call from the morgue, have largely passed away themselves. Gerald Kavanaugh's sisters, Klaus Chrisman's widow, Frederick Capen's fellow nurses. They went to their graves without an answer, and yet the case is not closed. Dan Cunningham continues to work it. New witnesses have come forward in the last few years. Some of them men who knew the suspect, who heard him brag, who saw his sketches, who carried the secret for 50 years and finally could not carry it anymore. Genealogical DNA technology, the same technology that caught the Golden State Killer, is being applied to whatever physical evidence remains. Inspector Cunningham has hinted in interviews that an arrest, while not imminent, is not impossible. The suspect, if he is the man police believe he is now in his early 70s. Time is the only enemy the Doodler never planned for. He chose victims who could not speak for themselves. He chose a moment in history when their lives were considered less valuable. He counted on shame, on silence, on a city that would look the other way. And for 50 years he was right. But the city has changed. The shame has lifted. The survivors who once could not speak now have grandchildren who are speaking for them. And somewhere in the Bay Area tonight, an old man with a sketch pad in a drawer is waiting for a knock at the door. The question is no longer whether justice is coming. The question is whether it will arrive before he dies. If this case haunted you, do one thing right now. Subscribe to Dark Cases and turn on the bell. Every week we open another file the world tried to forget. And share this video with someone who still believes some killers get away. Because as long as we keep talking about them, they never really do.